Find out which steroid I think makes you the most vascular. Stay tuned.
How's everything with you? What's going on?
Yeah, I'll call you another time. I'm recording. I have a guy doing a documentary with me.
Jumbo Colombo.
I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
Rx Television, RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your weekly question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding, diet, training, supplementation. It is all on the table. We're going to go right into the questions. The first two questions on this show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Interesting one here. We often talk about different methods of tanning. This one is about tanning pills. Are there any tanning pills on the market that you would recommend?
You know, years ago when I first started bodybuilding, this was back in probably the late 80s or going to the early 90s, you would see these advertisements for these tanning pills in like the back of the Weeder magazines. And what they basically were was like, it was like that carotenoid stuff. So it turned you orange. Basically, it made you into a carrot. And it didn't give you a good tan. Then they started advertising, Pro-Tan came around. And I remember buying bottles of Pro-Tan. I wasn't even competing. I just wanted a nice tan. And because there were self-tanners at the time, but they were kind of made you a little orange too. And the Pro-Tan kind of gave you a nice tan, but it was really dark, and probably not good for your skin because it's like acetone, so you don't want to be putting it on every day and stuff like that. But then I remember, I always said, I wish they had something that would actually make you really tan. Like, in other words, things that would actually cause your body to produce melanin, aside from just sitting in the sun or going to tanning bed. And then they came out with Melanotan. Melanotan 2 is usually what most people use. And it's injectable. It's not oral, but it works. It makes the melanocytes produce melanin, and you get darker from it. The key is you don't want to do too much because it can make you a little nauseous. It does have a sexual side effect, almost like a Viagra-like effect. But once again, the key is not to take too much of it, because if you do, you get kind of nauseous. So usually if you get like a 2 milligram vial, you put like 2 mLs of water in there. You could take literally 5 units at night before bed. You do it for like, anywhere from like 7 to 14 days. And then what happens is, you should get your color by then. Take it right before bed, because it'll make you a little flushed and maybe a little queasy, but not bad if you're only taking 5 units of it. And then you go into sleep anyway. By the time you wake up in the morning, you should be fine. And after, like I said, about 7 to 14 days, depending on how quickly your body produces melanin, you should have a decent tan, and you can kind of do it like once a week after that to maintain. Now, if you go in the sun with the stuff, it works faster and it works better, but you don't have to. And that, I think, seems to be the best way to get color, especially for people who don't necessarily tan. Now, the only side effects, like I said, are you might get a little nauseous, or sometimes if you have like very light freckles that you don't even know on your skin that are there, you might just start seeing like little beauty marks popping up that you didn't even know you had. And you're like, what the hell did that come from? And it's not that the melanotan is making you produce new ones. It's darkening up the ones that were there that you didn't even know were so light. When you stop the stuff, it reverses itself. So that is a good thing. It's not like a permanent thing, but you'll find out where you have some marks that you didn't even know you had. But you get good color. The problem is also if you do too much of it, you start turning purple almost because your lips get too dark. It tans your underarms, it tans everything. So you don't want to make yourself too dark. I've told guys, I told my friend Mike Z, I said, Mike, you're purple. He was at the purple at the Olympia one year. He used too much of it. So once again, be an artist. Don't be an abuser.
Second question, again, these first two questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Your thoughts on some WWE wrestlers, come and gone, Brock Lesnar, Triple H, Dave Bautista, name a few. They're huge, had good bodies. I guess he's asking about gear usage in their prime, and if so, I don't know if we're talking era to era. He wants to know your opinion.
Well, back in the Hulk Hogan era, with the Macho Man and Hulk and all the big names, Superstar Billy Graham, those guys all used gear because it wasn't illegal then. And then in the newer era, once the Triple H came, that era I call it, the guys get tested, and nowadays they get really tested strictly. So. The physiques, on TV, you look a lot bigger than, you do in person. So, right. I'm working with Cody Rhodes. He doesn't take anything, but he, and in person, you wouldn't even think he's big. He's ripped, because we really work very hard on his diet. We get everything as perfect as we can get it. But on stage, in an arena on TV, he looks big. He's ripped, and it really translates well. So, if you notice, the guys today don't look like the bulky, massive guys from the 70s and 80s. They're just because they're not using the gear. I'm sure they would love to, but they can't, and that's the rules. And so no one wants to break the rules because everyone's making big money over there, and then they're big celebrities. So, I really, it's actually commendable in the sense I would love to see monsters up there, but at the same time, it probably prevents them from getting hurt because you don't really want like 300-pound guys, falling on top of you from the top rope. But these questions are from the Dave Palumbo Experience app, by the way. And if you want to sign up for it, you can download it from your Android store, the iTunes store. It's $29 a month. You get me as basically a coach in your back pocket. It's a pretty good deal because you get access to all my writings, all the videos I've ever done in a very organized way in the app. My off-season diets, my pre-contest diets, my keto diets, the steroid cycles, off-season, pre-contest, detoxification programs. Everything's in the app. Plus, I answer everyone's questions in an open forum, so you see everyone's questions and everyone's answers. That's a really good learning experience. I always loved reading Muscle Media back in the day because I like to read the questions and answers because a lot of times I don't even know I have the question until I see it. And then I'm like, oh, shoot, I just learned something I didn't even know about. And then I do a Q&A video every week. So you get an extra Ask Dave, on video for the app members only. So it's a great resource. You guys have been supporting it. I can't even imagine. I never imagined having as many members as I do right now. Every month we pick up a lot of new members, and thank you to you guys out there. And when you support the app, and you're on there and you have it, it inspires me to do more for the app. So it's a learning experience. It's like having an ongoing continuing education program right in your back pocket. So thank you for that.
We take questions now from our Instagram page, from our YouTube page, and from our various social media outlets. Bit of a doozy here. So we got a DM, and he said, this is pretty urgent that he wanted this asked on Ask Dave, so I wanted to oblige. Says he has a friend that he's helping with her diet. She recently went through the same thing that you, Dave, went about 2 years ago. She had thyroid cancer removed, same process, same meds, and where she was radioactive. Anyway, I was trying to incorporate a few easy, quick meals while she was working. She's a kindergarten teacher. So naturally, in the beginning, while she's getting back in a diet mode, I put her in a shake and even your protein pudding. She said her endo and also her sister, who's a doctor, told her not to have protein shakes. Something about it interfering with thyroid absorption. Also was told some protein powders lead to chronic kidney disease.
The misinformation that's on the market, it's unbelievable. These doctors should just stay in their lane. I actually admire the doctors that tell people I don't know anything about nutrition or supplements. At least they're being honest. The guys that don't know anything that actually try to give advice based on what they read on TikTok or some 80-year-old medical journals are fucking doing a disservice to the public. Number one, people who take thyroid replacement, they take it first thing in the morning, okay? They take it on an empty stomach, so there's no interference with anything, right? Number two, protein powders don't interfere with thyroid medication absorption, okay? It just doesn't happen. There's no, what's the mechanism? I love these doctors when they say these things and they have no idea what the mechanism is. They just kind of throw shit out there and hope it sticks to the wall. And number three, we know that protein powders don't cause chronic kidney disease, okay? Or think about how many people buy protein powders on a regular basis. Everyone would be in kidney failure, and that's just not the case. So high blood pressure causes kidney disease, and we know that definitively. So, like I said, doctors are a wonderful thing, and some of them are very, very dangerous because they give out really bad information. And then guess what happens? This person, luckily, they know someone who is knowledgeable. But if they didn't know someone, they would tell all their friends what the doctor told them, and then that lie would be spread throughout, the world, so to speak. And everyone would be saying, "Oh, protein powders cause kidney disease." No, they do not. It's ridiculous. So, for what it's worth, as long as she's taking her medication on an empty stomach, she can use all the protein powder she wants. There's no interference.
Question, and our audience generally appreciates these kind of questions. Steroids that will make you more, or rather the most vascular. So vascular in appearance, what gear would you recommend for that?
Yeah, I can only give you my personal experience with doing that because I don't know necessarily if anabolic steroids cause vascularity as much as they can enhance it sometimes. Number one, because if the more blood you have in your body, the more volume of blood you're going to have, better vascularity. But I'll give you my impression on things that work very fast to create vascularity. Okay, nothing beats a McDonald's burger and fries, by the way. That's probably number one on the vascularity list. But taking a shot of testosterone suspension, because it works so fast, tends to really increase. Like if I took a shot of testosterone suspension now and ate a meal, probably within an hour or two, you would see like veins just popping out everywhere because it works super fast. It also disappears very fast. Trenbolone acetate, also very fast acting and doesn't cause any fluid retention really. So you really see the results of it. So that's why guys love tren acetate before a competition because it makes them really vascular as well. Now, some people would assume that, like something like anadrol might cause a lot of vascularity, but the problem is it causes a lot of fluid retention in a lot of guys too, so you don't really see it as well. Halotestin can cause a lot of vascularity too. So once again, fast-acting oral, it's just androgenic. It has no muscle building or anabolic properties to it, but androgenic means it stores glycogen. You're going to get a good pump from that. So the fastest three would be test suspension, halotestin, and tren acetate. I would say, long term, just stuff that causes vascularity on a regular basis. I noticed that EQ definitely increased my vascularity a lot, probably because it increases red blood cell count a lot. And even the short acting or the longer acting trenbolone and anthate, which we used, it was something different. It was Parabol back in the day. That caused vascularity, but it wasn't like immediate. It was like after you've been on it a few weeks. So short term. Suspension, halotestin, tren acetate.
Really good question here from Raw Muscle Glutes. Often chimes in with good questions. Something that you thought to be true or correct earlier in your bodybuilding career in terms of just bodybuilding, nutrition, what have you, that you now realize you were completely wrong about.
One of the few things I've ever really corrected in my nutritional advice was early on. I was like, if you're going to eat. Obviously, we know you need to eat a high protein diet, right? I was originally advocating that if you're going to eat carbs, you shouldn't eat fat at the same time. And if you eat fat, you shouldn't eat carbs at the same time. Because I was erroneously under the assumption that if you ate a lot of carbs, that the carbs would cause insulin release, which they do, and that you would absorb the fat as you would store the fat as fat. But insulin doesn't cause fat storage as fat; it causes carb storage as fat. So I was wrong about that. That was very early on in my career. And a lot of that information was on the internet because I was one of the first few guys writing for a lot of these initial websites in the early mid-90s. And that information was out there, and I corrected it like a million times. And every once in a while, it rears its head. Someone said, "Oh, I saw you say not to mix carbs and fat in the same meal," and that's not true because that's not how insulin works. And it's fine to put good essential fats into your meals with carbs and protein. There's nothing wrong with that. That was probably the one big correction I ever made. As far as other things, there really hasn't been too many other things that I was wrong about. It's, at least, and it wasn't that I came up with a lot of this stuff. A lot of the stuff was just information I read that I disseminated, but it wasn't like there was never anything that I was just like, holy mackerel, was I off base on that? And if there is, I'm the first guy to correct myself, because I don't want to spread bad information. I'm like RFK Jr. If you can prove him wrong, or you show him the study that disputes what he's saying, he'll change his opinion. I'm the same way, because we're always learning new stuff in science. And a lot of times I think the stuff we thought, we knew, we didn't know. And here's another good one. No one really knew what caused muscle memory. Originally, John Perilla had postulated that muscle memory was just nothing more than the fascia around the muscle stretching out. So if you stretch the muscle and the muscle grows, and then you stop training, that muscle fascia that was surrounding the muscle had already been pre-stretched. So you can, when you start training again, you grow right back to where you left off, because the fascia is already pre-stretched. That's not true. Muscle memory is that when you grow and you put on new muscle, you produce new muscle nuclei, and those new nuclei, which then enable the cells to get bigger, never change. They never disappear. So if you stop working out and the actual internal components of the cell get smaller, what's the word I'm looking for? Atrophy. When you start training again, you still have all those additional nuclei in the cell. They're just smaller, right? The cells themselves are just small. They grow right back to where they were, because the memory of the muscle is located in the brain of the cell, the nuclei. So the nuclei is the brain. So there is muscle memory was actually a good name they gave it, because the nuclei remember where the muscle cells were at, and they will go back to that point very rapidly. So that was also a mistake early on that was disseminated, and now we know what the real reason was. And the person who explained it to me best was Scott Conley, who's I would consider one of my mentors and probably one of the foremost authorities in protein metabolism.
Question about BP medications. Are BP medications a must on cycle, or should only be taken if the blood pressure is elevated?
Some guys just don't have high blood pressure. I've seen guys on a ton of stuff. They weigh 300 pounds and their blood pressure is low. So why would you give that person a blood pressure medication? Because they're going to go too low and they're going to feel terrible. So yeah, you got to measure your blood pressure. The great thing is that a blood pressure cuff these days costs about $20, an auto inflate. You can test your blood pressure, and if it's high, you get on a blood pressure med, because we don't want to destroy our kidneys, right? And if you're low or normal, then you don't do it. The key is to take it throughout the day, because you might be low first thing in the morning, or you might be low after taking a nap, but then the rest of the day you're high. So I would like to say, as like a knee-jerk response, it's safe to take a blood pressure medication like a mild ACE inhibitor when you go on cycle to prevent any issues, but not everyone needs it. Just like not everyone needs an estrogen blocker. I know guys that just don't aromatize very much. And when you test their DNA, the DNA shows that they're not aromatizers. So why, if their estrogen is already low, why would you make it super low and then they lose their sex drive and their androgen receptivity is down? So you got to go by blood work and diagnostic testing. So test your blood pressure. If you're a little high, even borderline high, it's okay to take a blood pressure medication. But if you're low, you don't want to do it.
When we get questions about training, it's funny because I remember your answer would always be yes, right? We get questions about different variations, different trainer techniques. Well, this one is an interesting philosophical one. It's from Bilal Hamide. I'm seeing more and more pros and amateur bodybuilders go for the push-pull legs than the bro split nowadays. Can you find justification for it? And is it a better training methodology to put on size?
Push-pull, and I remember hearing that back in like the late 80s when I first started training. I would see guys at the gym training push-pull. So this is not something that anyone created recently. Push-pull is, push day is triceps, shoulders, chest. So anything you're pushing. Pull is biceps and back. I always found that I've tried the routine back in the day because I would copy what guys in the gym did, but push day was way too much for me. I thought shoulders, chest, and triceps, you'd be in the gym for 3 hours, or even if you're in the gym for 2 hours, one of those body parts is not getting a good workout. Because after you do chest, you're not going to be able to do shoulders maximum. And after you do shoulders, you can't do chest maximum. So that's hurting. And then if your arms are not great, your triceps is going to get a real crappy workout if they're going third, which is usually the case. So I don't like that. Even back and biceps is a little tougher. Not as bad as the push day, but I've done this for a long time. I've experimented with every different routine. To me, one body part per day, once a week, worked perfectly. And you know what? I look forward to doing the body part. Whenever I did multiple, because push-pull legs is you do it twice a week. It's like your neck. You just think you got over chest. You're doing it again in a couple days. It's too much. I would do chest on one day, shoulders one day, back one day, arms one day, legs one day, and that seemed to work really well. If I even told you guys this at one point, I prioritized arms where I was doing triceps on its own day with calves, and I was doing biceps and forearms, and I was doing an 8-day split. But by and far, a 5-day split with 2 days off a week seems to be ideal, and it's the best way to be able to train hard, get maximum weights pushed, yet recover enough to be able to do it again the following week. That's just my experience.
Our good friend Emily ADC on Instagram wants to know that if you and I are going to be at the Pittsburgh Pro, which is coming up in May 10th. I know you and I have had some discussions. Any idea if you are going to be in Pittsburgh? I know I'm probably yeah.
I talked to Jim Mannion the other day. He called me. We always chat every once in a while. And I think I'm going to go, because he's having a big expo there. And
right.
It's not the weekend I have my kids, so I can do it. Unfortunately, New York Pro is the weekend I have my children, so I'm not going to be able to go to New York Pro. So I'm thinking, usually I go to New York Pro, but this is the first year Mannion's having that show. It's an open, first time he's ever had an open. He's got an expo with it. So it sounds like something we should probably cover because it's going to be a big event. They're giving away $100,000 first place. So I'm pretty positive that I'll be at the Pittsburgh, and I'm assuming if I go, you're going to go. So,
yeah,
so we'll be covering that for RxMuscle for sure.
No, my plans are pretty much tethered to whether or not you were going to go or not. But
I guess we got to book it.
Yeah.
We shouldn't wait anymore at this point.
No, it should be a good time, and obviously you have an absolutely stacked lineup on the cards. There's a question about.
Wait, I want to clarify something. We're getting related to Pittsburgh. I made a mistake. Matter of fact, when Jim and I were talking. Robin Chang is actually running the expo for. I thought Bob Lorimer was. Robin Chang's running it for Jim, and then Bob I think brought in like the strongman and helped bring in some special acts, but it was really Robin I guess who's running the whole expo. And I wanted to clarify that because I don't like to be inaccurate. And on the Heavy Muscle Radio show, I had indicated that Bob was running the expo, but Bob just is working on some of the acts that they're bringing in there, whereas Robin is the I guess the brains behind the whole expo itself.
All right. We often do tease on the show that the show's about bodybuilding, it's about training and all that, but we do like to expand a little bit to get your opinions on other things, perhaps not related to bodybuilding at all. This question is about the Howard Stern show. Better era of the Howard Stern show, the Jackie or the Artie years?
Well, I'm a huge Howard Stern fan. As a matter of fact, I might be the only person who has actually a picture on my wall of Howard Stern, in the studio. And I loved watching the show, not necessarily for the goofy shit they did, although I picked up a lot of stuff that we used on After Hours and the original Heavy Muscle TV show from that. But I really liked his interview style. And lately, Howard Stern got very woke lately. And I don't know what happened to him or what changed. Maybe just people, when they get old, they get kooky sometimes. But the two eras he's talking about are when Howard was at his best. And they both have a charm of their own. Artie was a nutcase because he was a drug addict, and it was really funny. And that was what I went to high school with when Artie was on the show. And then obviously that changed when Artie got arrested, and they had to kick him off the show, and they got the new era. But I thought they were both great, and they both had their own charm, and I thought they were both had their own benefits, which just is a testament to how good Howard was. He was able to change the flavor of the show with different people and still make it that successful, because really the show is about Howard. And so as long as the supporting cast supported Howard, the show was great. Without Howard, there is no show. They have they have their little other shows where they do the interns and everything. They have to do shows, and they're okay, but they're really talking about Howard the whole time. So Howard is the whole show, and he always has been. I mean, the guy has got longevity, obviously. He's still a great interviewer, but he's just his political views have really kind of got kind of weird over the last couple of years. So I kind of haven't really been listening to the show as much as I used to.
Question about somebody that was just recently hospitalized after an intense CrossFit workout. My body was unusually sore. I had to go to the ER. My CK levels were through the roof, and it turns out I had rhabdo and had to get hospitalized for IV fluid replenishment. Did this happen due to not eating enough, or how can I prevent this in the future? The workout was not too far off from what I usually do. So CK levels through the roof, intense CrossFit workout, and they ended up in the ER.
Yeah. Well, CrossFit is by nature, just like endurance running is a chronic, you're in a chronic state of overtraining. Most of these guys never take days off, and I did the same thing when I was a runner. And you know what the problem is? CK levels or CPK levels, creatine phosphokinase levels, are enzymes that are found inside the muscle cells. They convert creatine into creatine phosphate, which helps with endurance, obviously. And but what happens is when you break down muscle, that enzyme leaks into the bloodstream, and it gives you high elevated levels. I always said you can tell about how hard someone trains by how high their CPK levels are. Mine used to be through the roof, just from bodybuilding, because you're breaking down an enormous amount of muscle. So for the average person, if they come into the ER and their CPK levels are high and they don't really work out, okay, they get diagnosed with rhabdomyolysis. That means their muscles are breaking down for no apparent reason. Okay, if you're a bodybuilder, CrossFit, runner, cyclist, and you go into the ER with high CPK levels, and the doctor diagnoses you with rhabdo, he's a moron. You have high levels because you break down muscle. You're doing it to yourself. Your muscles are not spontaneously breaking down. Therefore, you don't have rhabdomyolysis. You've had self-induced rhabdomyolysis, okay? So all that means, is it sounds like the person was very dehydrated. And that happens a lot with CrossFit because they sweat so much. A lot of times they're doing stuff outside or in unair conditioned like warehouses. And it sounds like the person just needed some fluid replacement, maybe take a day or two off because maybe they were overtrained. So overtraining is very prevalent. Dehydration, very prevalent in CrossFit. So I hate when I remember they diagnosed Larry Wheels a couple of years ago or a year or two ago with rhabdo also. I did a whole video on that.
Yep.
If you're an intense training athlete, you can't get rhabdo, okay? It's impossible. You're inducing the rhabdo yourself. If you have super, super high levels and you feel like shit, take a couple days off. It's nothing that is spontaneously going on. You don't have any disease in your body. You don't have something that needs to be investigated. It's called training. Training causes high CPK, which gets then misdiagnosed as rhabdo. And unfortunately, it happens all too much, especially when bodybuilders get freaked out and they go to the ER because they don't know what they're seeing. All they see is blood levels, and they're reading levels, and they're not thinking, oh, this person works out super intensely on a daily basis. That's probably what it's from. All they see is, hey, Mrs. Jones came in with this and she had rhabdo. This guy must have the same thing. So take it for a grain of salt.
We used to get a lot more of these questions earlier on in this show. I remember we used to have people literally just sending you their cycle and what you thought about it. So Minchinator wants to know, he said he's 8 weeks out, 500 tests weekly, 200 mass weekly, 50 Winstrol per day. Is that time frame proper for the mast and the Winnie? Wants to now use nicknames, or is it too long for the Winstrol in particular?
How many weeks is he staying on it?
He's 8 weeks out. So
yeah, no, that's exactly when you should start it. That's perfect. Yeah.
Let's see. Dealing one of those deep philosophical questions. When do you know that it's time to step away from competitive bodybuilding?
That's a loaded question. When you no longer love it anymore. No, I think that there's two schools of thought here. Number one is when you've lost that passion, where you realize, yeah, you know what, it's not as important to me as it used to be, and maybe I'm not looking as good as I did the year before that, and maybe I've stayed too long. Some people could actually come to that realization on their own. I did. I said, you know what? It was 2004. I was like, I wasn't better than in 2003. My shoulders were really hurting me. I'm like, you know what? My blood pressure is a little high. I'm on a blood pressure medication now. Maybe I'm getting a message from up above. It's time to step away because you know what? I don't want to overstay my welcome, so to speak. And I always said I would never go past 40. That was a definite hard stop. And I was almost 35. So I'm like, you know what? This is a good stopping point for me. So I stopped. But there are other people that I know, guys that are 70 that still want to compete, like, at the Olympia. They have that passion that I can't get enough of it. Those guys, as long as you're healthy, then, stick around, president's calling me. Oh, King Kamali's calling me. Then stick around. But the problem is that things start to happen, okay, with your body. High blood pressure, okay, blood sugars are not good. Maybe you have some blockages in your coronary arteries. Maybe your kidney function is not so good. Those are warning signs to you that, you know what, it's probably not a good idea to be 280 pounds right now. And so that's a second scenario where you have to kind of really have a hard look at yourself and say, what are the benefits of me staying in the sport? Okay, versus, am I just obsessed with this? And is it really, maybe I should figure out an exit plan at this point, you know, and still stay in the sport so I can make money from it, and or be like I do, you know, like have a YouTube channel, have a social media presence, be a critique of the sport, and maybe start a business related to the sport, coach people. But you know when that time is. The problem is most people say, you know, I'm going to do it anyway. And that's when the problems happen. So I would never tell someone it's time to quit unless they had, you know, unless they were like, you know, Boston Lloyd and they had no kidney function left. But, you know when it's time. But you have to have a very honest talk with yourself. Some people are more honest than other people. I'm like a person that looks in the mirror, and if I don't like what I see, I don't even want to like show anyone anymore. I'm done. You know, that's it. And when I realize I can't be better than I was the year before, I don't want to compete anymore, because I only want to show people my best. You know, now when you get older, you know, you can say, hey, look how I look. I'm almost 60 years old. You know, so it's a different show your best. But when you're in the prime of your career and you're at the best, you know, when you're at the highest level, you know, when you can't do it anymore, you step away. And we've seen a lot of bodybuilders retire recently, right? And it was the right time. They got out on top, or, you know, almost on top, and now they're doing great things. So I respect that. But, you know, only you know when the right time to step away is. Sometimes you might need a little kick in the ass because you're maybe overstaying your welcome. But, you know, just be honest with yourself, because let's face it, there is life after bodybuilding, and you do not want to, you know, walk around with, you know, with no kidneys, or you don't want to walk around with, you know, having, you know, open heart surgery because you're not, you know, you're pushing too hard, or that, you know, you need every joint in your body replaced, you know, although, you know, that's probably going to happen at some point anyway. But the question is, you know, how much pain do you want to live in, as my father always said. And only you can answer that.
Take one more question. It's about Tesamorelin. Where does Tesamorelin rank versus, quote, PED fat burners? I guess then the secondary to that is, what do you think your opinion is on the best fat burner out right now? You can peptide, PED, or what have you.
I've ranked them before. I haven't changed my mind in the last 20 years. Clenbuterol is the best fat burner you can use. It's the fastest acting, the most potent. I would put T3 or Cytomel, you know, thyroid hormone, active thyroid hormone, is probably the next best. And they seem to work very well together, which is usually what people use. We synergize them together. Everything else after that is not as good. Okay, so does growth hormone burn fat? It does, but not as effectively as those two. People always ask, we talked about this last week, I think, on on one of the TV shows, about DNP. DNP burns fat really well, but it also kills you. So that's not even in the conversation. We've removed that from the conversation because it's too dangerous, right? So we have clenbuterol 1, Cytomel or T3 2, GH3, and then you get your GH releasing agents. So it's like the Tesamorelin is a growth hormone releasing peptide. So it can cause a little bit of GH release from your pituitary, but it's never going to be as potent as taking the actual growth hormone itself. Because when you put growth hormone into your body, it causes direct fat burning. You know, it mobilizes fat directly. You don't know how much GH your body's going to release in response to taking the Tesamorelin or the GHRP6 or the hexarelin, or all the different variety of GH releasing agents out there. They all work a little differently. Nothing's as good as GH. So it's clenbuterol, T3, and GH are the top three. As far as, you know, over-the-counter fat burners that work, I'm not a big stimulant fan. I don't like overstimulating the body. It's like going out into your car and saying, I want to burn more gas in my car. And you just, as the car's in park, you just step on the accelerator and crank that accelerator. Not good for the engine of the car. That's what stimulants do. So do they burn a little bit more fat? Yeah, they do, because you're revving your engine higher. I like, doing things a little bit more behind the scenes, resensitizing your body to what is it called? To the peptide that makes you not hungry. What am I thinking of? I'm drawing a blank on it. It's tricking the body into burning fat, providing the thyroid gland with enough of the right ingredients, iodine. What is it?
No, Ozempic, right?
No, I was thinking about what causes the hunger to stop in the body. It's a naturally released hormone. I can't remember the name, but not G-relin. It's the other one. I'm drawing a blank, but it doesn't matter. But resensitizing yourself to these appetite suppression hormones is really
leptin.
Good. Leptin, yeah. Thank you. Resensitizing yourself to leptins is very important. We make a product from Species Nutrition called Lipolyze. It resensitizes your body to leptin. In doing so, your appetite goes down. It also tricks the body into wasting calories as heat, which is a good way to burn fat too, because it doesn't raise your heart rate, it doesn't raise blood pressure, it doesn't cause anxiety. Methods like that are good, but not as effective, obviously, as clenbuterol and T3 and GH. But it's a good over-the-counter addition to throw in there on top of that. Now, Ozempic and the GLP-1 agonists work really well, because what they do is they reduce appetite between meals, because they slow the transit of food through the intestinal tract, and they do have some sort of a direct fat burning effect. What's erroneously reported in the news and on TikTok and Instagram is that they cause metabolism and loss of muscle mass. That is not true. Okay, if you take these GLP-1 agonists and don't eat anything, okay, and miss meals, you will lose muscle as well as fat. Just like if you starve yourself while you're not on those drugs, you will lose muscle mass, right? If we don't eat protein every couple hours, you lose muscle. It's the same thing with this. So what this drug is doing is it's inhibiting your appetite. So people go hours and hours and hours without eating, and of course they lose muscle. So bodybuilders and people, physique athletes who use Ozempic and Mounjaro and the other ones out there, they don't lose muscle mass because they're eating their meals in addition to taking this supplement. They're just using the drug to not eat in between meals and cheat. And so that's a very effective way to lose body fat as well, because it's controlling your appetite, really. But in terms of what drugs directly burn fat, it's clenbuterol, T3, and GH.
And that's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. If you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss anything that we have upcoming over the course of the next few weeks. Earlier in the episode, we talked about the Pittsburgh Pro. Well, that's going to be sandwiched, obviously, with the New York Pro right after that, but it's going to be in the thick of the contest season. Detroit Pro next weekend. So we're going to have coverage, preview segments, iron debates, all that's going to be coming back. So if you subscribe, hit the notification bell, you're not going to miss any of that and or more that we have on the channel. Only episode right now of the After Hours podcast from yesterday. And then, of course, Sunday night's episode of Heavy Muscle Radio. And then tomorrow, Dave, one-on-one with Bob Chick. I'm sure there'll be nothing controversial, nothing extreme stated in that one. It was about, Dave, what did you say? It was about 2.5 hour interview?
No, it wasn't that long. It could have gone 2.5 hours because Bob and I both can talk for a long time. It was over an hour. I think people will enjoy it. It was very controversial in the sense that we talked about topics that are out there in social media right now and that people are arguing about and trying to shut down Bob for. And, I was very defensive of Bob's right to say whatever is on his mind, because freedom of speech has to be protected. I've said it over the last couple of weeks over and over and over again. I support Bob's right to say whatever he wants, even if I don't agree with it, because I don't agree with a lot of what Bob says. We argue all the time, but that doesn't mean that we don't like each other. It just means that we argue about stupid stuff online. But he has the right to say it, and people should not try to cancel him and shut him down. I don't like that. And so we talk about that. We talk about the Arnold Classic, what happened, why he didn't MC the show. We talk about the athletes rep thing. We talk about Nick Walker. So I think people are going to really like the interview.
Check it out tomorrow on the RxMuscle YouTube channel. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.